Welcome to the ArtsWA Arts and Education recorded information session. This is regarding the arts and education grants that are now open. It is the fiscal year 26 Creative Start Project Grant, as well as the fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 27 Sustaining Project Grant. These grants are open from January 6, 2025 until 5 p.m. on February 13, 2005. In this info session, I'm going to discuss who on the arts education team is here to support you throughout this process, as well as go over very lightly our grant guidelines and support that is needed for your application. And lastly, navigating our online grants platform called Submittable and uplifting very specific portions of the application that you might find difficulties with, and just to point that out for you here. So this is our Arts and Education Grant team. I'm going to start with Tamar Crames. She is the AIE Program Manager, and she specifically, of the two grants just mentioned, oversees the AIE Sustaining Project Grant, and that is the 2-year grant from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 27. Also on the team is Alexis Sarah. She is our AIE Project Manager, and of the two grants, specifically supports the Creative Start Project Grant. That is a 1-year arts and integration pre-K through 3rd grade grant that we have for fiscal year 26. And then this is me. I am Kale Matsui. I'm the AIE Program Coordinator, and I am here to provide you with technical support, whether on submittable or general questions regarding both the grants. So whether you have questions about Creative Start Project Grant or the Sustaining Project Grant, and I will elevate it to either Tamar or Alexis as needed. With considering funding that we have for the coming years, we are requiring that applicants apply for only one of the following AIE program grants, which is the Creative Start Project Grant or the Sustaining Project Grant. However, larger regional agencies, which are ESDs or educational service districts, school districts, tribal governments, and others may be eligible to apply for multiple AIE grants. If you have questions about eligibility for this, please do reach out directly to Tamar at tamar.crames@arts.wa.gov. And if you have questions about applying to multiple ArtsWA programs, that is possible. So if you'd like to apply for one arts and education grant and a grant in another team at ArtsWA, say for a grant with the GTO team or the Grants to Organizations team, you are very welcome and encouraged to apply to multiple programs, so long as the expenses and the services that you're applying for are separate and do not overlap, because you can only have one ArtsWA grant per expense line item, per service, per project. And this is the timeline and funds by grant. So both of these grants are under the arts and education umbrella. So oftentimes throughout the criteria, throughout the application, you'll notice that there are a lot of similarities, but we are going to take a moment to highlight the differences as much as possible. So starting with the Creative Start Project Grant, that is for $10,000, and it is funded at the full amount. If your application, upon review by the panelists, is approved for funding, you would receive $10,000. You would not receive a percentage of your ask amount. And your application must be asked at $10,000 at the full amount. So your budget must reflect that. The expenses of your project must reflect that amount or more. And that is a 1-year grant. So the expenses related to this project that's being funded has to be made between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th, 2026. Our second grant type is the Sustaining Project Grant, and that has a range of $15,000 to $30,000 that is distributed over 2 years. So if you ask for $30,000, that means you are asking for $15,000 per year. And I hope that makes sense. Please reach out to us at any time if you have questions regarding that. But the first year, July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026, you would be within the range of $7,500 of an ask to $15,000. And same for the year after that. When you are applying, your grant request amount can be in that range. So you can request as little as $15,000, which means $7,500 per year, or as much as $30,000, requesting $15,000 a year. These awards are not typically at the full ask amount. So there is a percentage or a range. Say that you requested $30,000, it could be that 95% of that $30,000 is what is going to be awarded if the panel approves your project for funding. And that, again, is what we call funding at a percentage. Organization eligibility. Looking at this chart here, almost all of these listed organization types are eligible for both the Creative Start Project Grant and the Sustaining Project Grant. The only difference is that Creative Start is focused on early learning education, which is defined as like preschool, pre-K to third grade students and aged students. And therefore, for the Creative Start Project Grant, Head Start or ECEAP organization types are eligible for the Creative Start. Otherwise, for both Creative Start and Sustaining, we also, in addition, have organization types eligible, including public school or school districts, ESDs or educational service districts, tribal, state, or municipal government agencies, and 501c3 nonprofits. Project eligibility. The previous slide, we were discussing organization eligibility, and that's just focusing on the organization for AIE grants. Now we're kind of zooming into the project level. So the project that you are proposing for this grant opportunity must be tuition free for all learners, for students that are participating in this project. It is required that there is sequential teaching and learning, so it's not just a one-time event or a one-time field trip, but it does build upon previous lessons. Requires that your project does not replace or fund in-school instruction that's already part of the basic education. And with your request, the materials and equipment can only be used up to 25% of your overall project budget that is covered by ArtsWA's funds. Now we're going to zoom in even closer to the differences of eligibility between the Creative Start Project Grant and the Sustaining Project Grant. For the Creative Start Project Grant, as I had mentioned before, it is focusing on serving students anywhere within the range of pre-K to third grade students, families, and educators. And so if your project does serve maybe kindergarten to sixth grade students, the portion of the project that would be funded by Creative Start has to be the portion that is serving pre-K to third grade students, but it is still eligible for consideration by the panel. It can also include professional development for educators who specifically serve pre-K to third grade students. And the Creative Start project is and has to be focused on arts integration. Arts integration is when you're lifting up an arts discipline as well as a non-arts discipline, and your project meets the learning outcomes for both of those areas with specific learning standards. So that could be a dance artistic discipline and science, for example. Moving on, looking at the specific eligibility requirements for the Sustaining Project Grant. In the first bullet, we are saying demonstrate a minimum of 3 years of arts education programming. That's really talking about your organization. Does your organization have experience of 3 years or more in providing arts education program? If yes, that's great. If your project is totally brand new, you've not done it before, that's fine. And that is eligible for consideration as a part of your application. So your organization needs that 3-year minimum of experience. Your project, not so much. Regarding your project, the projects that you propose must increase access to arts learning for anywhere within the age range of pre-K through 12th grade students in Washington State. So if your project is focused on grades 6 to 8, that meets all the other requirements as well. That is an eligible project for consideration in our grant opportunity. Funding priorities. All of this information is found within our guidelines for each of these grant opportunities, and we'll have links in the description of this video as well. But we wanted to pull out these specific portions. The funding priorities are the opportunity for additional points to your application. It is not something that the panel scores on or staff scores on, but it is additional points based on your answers as an organization. So for the Sustaining Project Grant, there are 3 funding priority opportunities. The first being organization size. Your organization will have to have an operating annual budget of $350,000 or less. If you do have that, you would be asked to upload a board-approved budget as evidence towards your organization size, and that will grant your application 5 additional points. In organization location, we are asking for you to answer where your organization is located, and basically if you are outside of the I-5 corridor spaces. And that is an additional 5 points if you are. And the last funding priority type is project locations. This is focusing on where your project is serving students. And so for some folks, that might be in different counties or different cities from where your organization is actually located. And if your project locations are within distressed counties, as related to unemployment rates, and more links will be provided in the guidelines, then that would provide your application an additional 10 points. And you would have to speak to how specifically you are having built-in efforts and strategies to serve those counties in order to provide that evidence for this funding priority and opportunity. The Creative Start Project Grant has just 2 of the previous mentioned funding priority opportunities. That's organization location and project locations. And for the project location, that's an opportunity for an additional 10 points to your application. Even if your organization or your project doesn't meet these funding priorities, we still encourage all eligible projects and eligible organizations to apply. And now we're going to head into the Submittable Walk-Thru. And I'm about to change screens to my website browser in just a moment. But before navigating away from here, I wanted to show you that if you've already started a draft, if you have used Submittable before, if you just want to start by making an account, the way that you would log on to Submittable is going to manager.submittable.com. That's highlighted at the top of this screenshot. And it will take you to a page of My Submissions. You can toggle to the Drafts tab, and that's pretty much where you'll see the draft that you're working on. And you can see here, I've begun a draft for ArtsWA Community Investments. That's us. And the opportunity is called AIE, Arts and Education, Sustaining Project Grant for 2 years, fiscal year 26 to 27. The due date for that submission is February 13th, 2025 at 5 o'clock p.m. Please note it is not due at midnight, but at 5 o'clock p.m. And then you'll be able to continue that submission if you hadn't submitted it yet, preview it, or delete it. But don't delete it. Please finish and submit it to us. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out through Submittable. There's a nifty message tab for you to message us, or you can email us directly on Outlook. Or we have Outlook. Use whatever emailing system you have. So now I'm going to pull over our browser here, and I'm going to start perhaps with just our homepage. Our homepage here. I believe this is a quite zoomed in approach, but here there's a few ways you can navigate to our AIE grant opportunities. So with not wanting to get too confusing, there's the tab here called Grants, and that lists all the teams in ArtsWA who have grants underneath here. And we are Arts and Education. Or if you know that you're working with Arts and Education, you can go straight to our tab, Arts and Education, and click on us. We have a ton of programs with AIE, and I encourage you to check out more. But here in that first box, we have Arts and Education grants. And you can see side by side, we have that Creative Start Project Grant and the Sustaining Project Grant. So when you click on either one of those, it'll take you to its own grant page. Say what grant you're looking at, for what years is it supporting, and there will be links here. Maybe I can zoom in. That will say View Guidelines. If you open that, it will be an online view of our PDF document. And you can print that out, have that by your side as reference. I highly recommend that. But it goes into extreme detail, all of the pieces that I've just quickly gone over in this recording. Talking about, is your organization eligible? What's not eligible? Allowable expenses. And this is particularly important for your budget that you create for your project, and what we cannot fund. Even though we as ArtsWA, state funded or federally funded, cannot fund these expenses, your project can definitely have those expenses. It would just be covered by other funds. Okay. Again, that information about whether you can apply for multiple ArtsWA grants across teams, yes. Within AIE, just one. Unless you feel like your organization is a larger regional agency, please contact Tamar Crames. And then it goes into what is required for you as an applicant and a potential grantee. And I'll go over that in a moment, but a lot of organization identifiers. What are the many things that we wanted to list out for you that you'll need, and I'll go over in a moment. And then apply on Submittable. Click here to apply, and in other places. And then it'll show you what happens after you apply. ArtsWA staff, myself included, will screen your application to make sure that it meets the eligibility requirements. We highly suggest you submit your application as soon as possible, so that I or one of our team members can screen it and make sure that your application's not incomplete, that you're not missing certain eligibility pieces, that your work samples came through okay, so that by the time it goes to panel, the panelists aren't worried about whether or not this is eligible. They know it's eligible, and then they can score just based on these criteria listed here. So the panel is comprised of arts education leaders, ArtsWA commissioners, and people who have experience with the type of work that these applications are referencing in their arts and education proposals. So that is who comprises the panel. And this is what they're scoring the applications on. At least for the Sustaining Project Grant, they're almost truly identical between the two grant opportunities. But here, we're looking at student learning, and there's 30 points possible. And these different criteria points are weighted, so heavily weighted on student learning, that the proposal describes arts learning goals for students, as well as methods of tracking and celebrating outcomes. 2, also heavily weighed, 30 points, is project design. So the proposal describes an achievable project plan demonstrated by a budget, a timeline, a staffing plan, and key partnership. 3, almost as much weighted, 25 points possible for equity and access. The proposal describes strategies that aim to increase and access and positive learning outcomes for a diversity of learners. And then 4, at 15 points, is our educator and artist support. The proposal describes financial support, planning time, and growth opportunities for contributing educators and artists. I'm going to go scrolling through here. It's our funding priorities that I had mentioned earlier, with links to what constitutes as a distress area and what the counties qualify for that listed here. Okay. Then there's notifications of awards by May 9th and additional information for applicants who do move on to become grantees with ArtsWA's arts and education grants. And then at the bottom, there's our specific contact information. Okay, so that's a guidelines PDF. The other link here, back on that ArtsWA AIE Project Grant page, if you were to view application outline, this is the PDF of exactly that, what the application would look like on our online platform. I also, welcome you to throw this into a Word document or print this out and keep this as a reference, because working outside of Submittable and then copying your answers and putting it into Submittable might save you from lost data or any headaches that come with the awesome thing called technology. So it just tells you, it shows you exactly word for word and in what order everything appears on the application. So let's jump back. And then finally, last but not least, we're going to click here to apply. And that's gonna bring you here to this page. It's just gonna say what it is you're trying to apply. And now you can see we've moved away from artswa.gov site to submittable.com site. And that is correct. If you scroll down here, it has a link again to those guidelines. And this is the first thing you'll see. It's called Organization Identifier. And it is just to link to your application for you to say, I'm applying on behalf of so-and-so, okay? In the past, you had to type your exact UEI or EIN number, but now you can just search for yourself. Olympia Supply is not an eligible organization for our grants, but I will use them just for this demonstration. And what you'll see is the Sustaining Project Grant eligibility form. Creative Start also has an eligibility form, and it'll ask you these questions we kind of just went over in this recording in previous slides. Is the applicant or the organization, do you have 3 years or more of education programming? Yes. 3 years or more. Are we based in Washington State? Yes. Is the applicant one of the following: an individual, fiscally sponsored organization, a for-profit organization, political, or an advocacy organization? Those are all not eligible. Educational service districts, however, you would select no for this. Is the proposed arts and cultural learning project tuition-based? No, it must be tuition-free. Does the proposed project seek to fund a one-time event, assembly, or performance? No, it must be sequential. And does the proposed project seek to promote religious content or observance? Nope. Does the project seek to fund only materials or equipment? Say you are requesting a 2-year grant at $15,000 a year, so your request is $30,000, and you want to use all $30,000 towards new drums. That would be, I'm a drummer, so I would love such a thing, but no, that is not eligible with our state and federal funding. So the answer would have to be no. Is the proposed project designed to replace or fund in-school instruction already a part of basic education? No. Okay. If you answered yes, I'm not going to do it now because it might cause me to have to refresh or however, but if you answered in a way that makes you ineligible for this grant, standard message that is not customizable will pop up and say, we're sorry, you're not eligible for this grant opportunity. And if that happens and you find that, no, this must be a mistake, please do reach out to us, email us and with your question, and we'll help you see what occurred there. Or if you're like, oops, I answered that incorrectly, you can also refresh your page and it should allow you to update your answers there. But if you click next and it takes you to this, please do not be alarmed. That is what it's supposed to do. You are not stuck in an never-ending loop. What happens, for whatever reason, it takes you back to the top, but you'll scroll down and you'll keep scrolling and it'll look very similar, but it's not, because now you are in the application. And that is just how it does it. And at this point, it will allow you to save a draft. However, that save draft button is only at the very bottom of the application. So you would have to scroll all the way to the bottom to show your save draft button. And you can try and press submit, but if there's any questions that are required that you have not answered, it will not allow you to submit. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top. And I'm going to pull out the very important things I want to make sure is on your radar as you're filling out this application. So you're going to start with your applicant legal name. That is your organization legal name. And if you're a public school, that will be your school district name. And then select your organization type, put in your physical address. And if you are a public school, you're going to put the physical address of your school district. Okay. Here is the funding priorities that we discussed earlier. If you have an annual operating budget of $350 or less, you would select yes. And then you would be able to upload a file that is a board-approved budget for the organization's most recent completed year. And these are the accepted file types here. And this is where it's talking about your organization location and where you are serving. And if you do select, yes, I am serving one or more of these listed counties, you will have to specifically demonstrate how you have those engagement efforts in the project information section. Regardless of whether your program is virtual or not, you will need to identify those strategies in the project information section. Then there's these organization identifiers. Statewide vendor number, which is very Washington based. If you have it, great. If not, that's fine. We will just provide you all of these links to more information on how to apply. And I would suggest if you're ever interested in applying for and receiving funding from Washington State, that this is a great thing to have, a statewide vendor number. Then there is the Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI. It replaced the DUNS number, if you're familiar with that, and it is issued by sam.gov. That is a federal identifier. If you don't have that, similarly, we will provide you links to learn how to attain one of those. And I highly suggest obtaining one as soon as you are able to, because it can be a complicated process that will impede your contracting should your proposal be approved for funding. So definitely for contracts, we need the SWV and the UEI, and then of course, entering your EIN for your organization. ADA compliance, definitely read through this material and select yes. Conflict of interest, if you have a conflict of interest, that does not bar you from being eligible or having your project eligible. It is just to declare conflict of interest, and we'll make sure that that conflict is addressed or not compromised during panel, for example. So you would just list those names here. And then please put the contact information of all of these individuals. There's definitions for how we at ArtsWA in the arts education team define those people. And then we get to your project. Please put your title and a snapshot. Our panelists want to have a pretty clear vision of what this project is, who or how those participating will experience your project, you know. So definitely include that there. How will your arts learning project be delivered? In school, out school, both, all eligible. We're just interested in that. And then we come to our first table. So these tables aren't super customizable in Submittable, but we do our best. But here you would enter numbers as applicable, and sometimes those pop up and I'm not sure what, you know, for example, and then they subtotal down here for total. This little icon of arrows pointing in opposite directions allows you to open the table more if you'd like a larger view, especially when it comes to our budget, and we'll see that in a moment. But you can continue to add numbers wherever applicable. You know, I'm just putting in random numbers there. Okay. And when you click this little X here, it will save your numbers. However, you will have to scroll all the way down and press Save Draft for all of your data to actually be saved. So I would recommend saving as much as possible, as often as possible, and also not keeping your windows open thereafter. Close them and then log back in and reopen when you need to work on it again. I will also speak more about collaborations shortly. Who will this project serve? This is where you will discuss how you're serving specifically, strategically, the counties that your project is located in as well, especially when connected to whether or not you're serving distressed counties for that funding priority element. Okay. Grant amount requested. This question does not exist in the Creative Start grant because you do not have a choice. It is $10,000. But for this project, this sustaining project grant, which is 2 years, you would request your amount here. And this is the amount you would receive 2 years total. So it could be up to $30,000 total, which means $15,000 per year. Now we get into the criteria questions, and this is what the panelists are going to be evaluating your proposed project towards. Okay. 1, student learning. The types of answers or questions that we have in the application, there is an example of multiple choice. Please select up to 3, and you can choose those 3 here, whatever is applicable. and, choose whatever is applicable again. Choose what is applicable of learning standards. And then every criteria has a long form answer. So those are multiple choice. This is the long form. And in the long form answer, you have an option of either writing your response, which is a limit of 300 words that you can type out here or type out elsewhere, copy it, paste it into here when you're ready. Or you can upload a video or audio response. And that is a 2 minutes maximum that you'll be able to upload here in these formats: M4A, MP3, MP4. Now on to project design. This is another table. You can't see, or maybe you can see the whole table at once. Depends how big your screen is. But again, you can use this little icon to expand your table view or decrease your table view. Okay. And this timeline is asking you, what are you doing in this quarter on year one? And maybe that's exactly the same in quarter one, in year two. Then you can copy and paste it. But it is an idea of key milestones that you want the panelists to know about your project. Then there's work sample. There's lots of instructions and examples of what could constitute as a successful work sample. But you have just one work sample opportunity to upload. It is required that you upload one. And that is either a PDF that is a maximum of 5 pages or a single video file that's a maximum of 5 minutes. Okay. And you would just scroll down here. What would you like to do? Which one? I'd like to do this, or I'd like to do that. And then you would choose your file and upload. Now, the last main thing I want to point out for your application is the budget. So there's a lot of instructions of how to fill out this budget table. Again, if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. This is an example of how a table, you are unable to see the whole table at once. So there's a little bar on the right-hand side where you can scroll down to see the table, or you can click these opposite arrows to expand. And even then you can't see the whole table, but it is larger at the very least. The Sustaining Project Grant, because you can ask how much money in funds or award you'd like to be awarded, if chosen by the panel, has this one cell here in this table that asks you, what did you request earlier in this application? I can say I requested the full opportunity maximum of $30,000. Okay, so that's what you would fill there. Now, I suggest you can just start with what is your project budget that you're already planning or working with. And maybe that is teaching artists. And you're going to have them work at, $500 for 5 hours. And then you would put your subtotal here and calculate that for your budget table. Or like you can be referencing your budget table in a different Excel sheet. Okay. So it'll calculate that subtotal here. So you can put it there. And these project expenses are in different categories. So fill them out as needed. The first category is paying individuals. The second is paying organizations. You would pay XYZ venue, and maybe it's just like a one-time cost. And that's your subtotal. This, that, and so forth. Okay. Then there's materials. And remember, your materials can only be a maximum of 25% coverage. So $7,500 of your grant award can be covered by an ArtsWA's fund. So say it was, I'm going to go back to drums, and maybe that subtotal is going to be $10,000. How many ones are there? Or zeros? 10,000. Okay. And the last category is other. So maybe it's accessibility support or translation services and so forth. You can add that there. Okay. Then you can go back and see, oh yeah, I definitely want to use the ArtsWA grant to cover all the payment for the teaching artist and to cover the whole venue, for example. Okay. Oh, but I remember I can only allow it to cover 7,500 at the most of material and so forth. And you keep going. Okay. So at the end of entering all of your pieces, this total has to match this total, right? Because you asked for 30,000, but you're saying you only want 20,000 covering your expenses, or you don't actually have $30,000 in expenses. So this is where you want to make sure your budget is complete. Also, you can't add more rows in the table. What you see is what you get. So let us know, again, if you have questions. And we suggest not waiting till the very last minute to submit this application because that severely limits how much we're able to support you and to support each organization and applicant equitably. Mm-hmm. Then there's the third criteria, equity and access, and the fourth, educator and artist. And just some optional pieces thereafter. And that is one look at the application. Again, once you save your draft, you can find it here in your manager.submittable.com profile in the draft section where you can continue, preview, or delete. And that is all that we have to share with you for this recording of our info session. Again, this is with ArtsWA, the Arts in Education, or AIE team. We have 2 grant opportunities open from January 6th to February 13th, 2025, ending at 5 o'clock p.m. on February 13th. That is the 1-year fiscal year 2026 Creative Start Grant for early learners and the 2-year fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 27 Sustaining Project Grant. And that is for pre-K through 12th grade learners. So my name is Kalei Matsui. Here's our contact information. It will also be in the description of this video. And I just wanted to say on behalf of the AIE team, mahalo nui loa, thank you so much for joining us.